What do nuclear materials, our solar system, or the spread of coronavirus have in common?
They are viscous, non-local entities that are massively distributed in time and space. They involve different temporalities than the human scale ones, and they exhibit their effects interobjectively. They are hyperobjects.
Things like evolution, the biosphere, or global warming are such massive objects, real entities right here, but they make pointing towards them tricky. Hyperobjects help us think ecologically. Take global warming, for instance. It is a viscous entity in the sense that it sticks and acts through other entities. It is non-local, since a strong breeze turning chairs, umbrellas, and all kinds of objects upside down on the street isn't global warming itself, but something like a local manifestation, as Levi Bryant puts it.
Global warming is made visible with the help of statistics, models, and data that speak about it and analyze it, but these attempts to grasp it are our access points to the hyperobject.
There isn't any meta or objective way to go around, below, or above it without some kind of alteration, or without getting caught in the process. This means that there's no way to pin down all that it is. Not that it isn't real, it is very real and more than I can point to. That's why skeptics can ignore it, because it is not this stronger storm, it is not this sea level rise or this fire, and yet it speaks through them. In this sense, it is uncanny, because it is untranslatable and ungraspable fully, but it is here. That's why Timothy Morton refers to hyperobjects as strange strangers, because they withdraw. The more we know about them, the stranger they become. Take this realization that we are living with and inside hyperobjects, and not on top of a world that sits over there. Okay? Face the depth of the smooth, stable, and constantly present kind of background that can be changed without any consequences. This is the depth of our habitual pattern.
We have no world because the objects that function as invisible scenery have dissolved. We coexist with human life forms, non-human life forms, and non-life forms on the insides of a series of gigantic entities with whom we also coexist. The ecosystem, biosphere, climate, planet, solar system.
There isn't any away anymore, as Timothy Morton puts it. The idea of a world has cheapened, because other beings have worlds too. And because there isn't a one-size-fits-all world dimension to rule. The end of the world is not the end of everything. It is an end of that matter, of that stuff that sits in a space for humans to colonize. It is a death of distance. The blank space that can be manipulated smoothly is exactly what is disappearing. It is an end of endings. The subject that is over here and the objectified lump of stuff from over there collide. The gap between the thinking human subject and everything else is extended between all beings. The human-world correlation is no longer the grand decider that sits on top of everything else.
There's a relation between me and the chair I'm sitting on right now, and another relation between me looking at it or thinking it. Some relations are not part of me, like what the chair is to the black cat sleeping on it, or to the worker who painted it, or to the floor on which it is sitting. Smaller and bigger objects on various scales interact with the chair, including the chair itself. Each of these encounters alters and translates the chair in a distinctively unique way without exhausting it. What does this all mean?
It means that if somehow we could listen to all of them one by one, there wouldn't be any right or complete correlation that could describe the chair fully. Things will be left out, because any contact between any entity and the chair will alter the chair, resulting in another form. Singing or writing about the chair is not the chair. There's a surplus. The chair isn't fully graspable in the appearance for some entity, a past state of the chair. One of the reasons we can't restrict thinking to the human-world correlation is the finitude of it. Although other philosophers will argue that we can burst through our finitude, that's not Timothy Morton's position.
We humans and more than human people are, for better or worse, caught up in algorithmic loops, stuck in massive hyperobjects forced upon us. We are poems about the hyperobject Earth. These entities are going to be here long after you and me are gone. We've seen how hyperobjects are stuck to us in this weird kind of way, how warmer days and stronger storms deliver the doom of global warming. And yet, the hyperobject is here, but it is not this rain falling over my head. You have been hearing how one thing delivers another, and how these massive things speak to us and host us. But we host other things in return too.
Timothy Morton talks about an explosion of worlds, perforated, shareable worlds full of holes. A potential infinity of entities on infinite scales opens up, which is exactly what ecological awareness is. The host-parasite duality becomes a bit blurry. It becomes unclear who's who. It becomes unclear which is the top symbiont. Instead of retweeting on and on, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, Timothy Morton aims to rewrite this explosive holism into an implosive one by saying that the whole is always less than the sum of its parts, a logic that he calls subsentence. There are 1 plus n entities inside the being. There's no end to it. Entities are wrapped in entities. No top and no bottom entity. A quite strange situation with more parts than wholes. It is holism, but a less violent one.
Objects are TARDIS-like, larger on the inside than they are on the outside. Perhaps even capitalism is less than its parts in this weird kind of way. By disassociating democracy and the social from its full grip over them, it becomes weaker and penetrable by all kinds of entities, not that tough and unchangeable as it appears. Perhaps there are more things that can dissolve it than there are things that keep it going. Imagine that.
We need holism, but a special, weak holism that isn't theistic. This is not to claim that there's no such thing as society. It is not neoliberal individualism. Wholes and parts are just as real as one another. This is also not to say that there aren't entities that are more powerful than us. There are, and we are caught in many of them, but we aren't completely reduced to them, nor are they to us.
And yet, each political and ethical decision is made on the inside of a hyper-object caught in the resonance of the zones that spell doom. There's a loop going on and on for quite some time, an algorithm that reproduces a certain kind of logic. Let's go back to agricultural age, and more exactly to what Timothy Morton calls agri-logistics, an automated program that reduces things to bland substances in order to manipulate and colonize them easily.
The world seen as something smooth and solid comes from this kind of logic that seeks to eliminate contradiction, fear, and anxiety. It is a way to draw a clear and rigid distinction between the human and the non-human, the sole purpose being to maximize existence, or better said, human existence, over and above any quality of existing. This logic implies a metaphysics of presence, which states that to be a thing you have to be constantly present. It relies on a default substance ontology, meaning that whatever one does to the field, plowing, sowing this and that, it won't change it, because its essence is merely decorated by accidents. We can now point to nature as a cycle, as something that is always harmonious and periodic. This is a view that emerged from agricultural age, and it's a product of the Romantic phase. For Timothy Morton, the concept of nature is exactly what is responsible for global warming. That's why he tries to deconstruct it.
The agrilogistic program is erasing ambiguity within the system in exchange for an industrial view of the world, blinding itself to unintended consequences. In other words, it is a recipe for disaster. The kind of disaster that exploded into the hyper-object we now call global warming.
That's why we need to find other ways to talk about entities, perhaps more unusual ways, that capture their animacy, ways that don't reduce things to dull substances for a human subject, ways that imply that there are more scales and that the human-world correlation doesn't sit on top. Humankind is ontologically smaller than the humans who make it up. Timothy Morton's idea of humankind is opposing the conventional representation of humanity and of nature that works in a binary opposition. Humankind is treated as an ecological entity and as a collective that doesn't exclude non-humans. In a paradoxical way, it is treated as a whole that is less than the sum of its parts. Traditional logic doesn't like this very much, but the kind of logic needed to talk about ecological beings and to talk about humankind can't be a product of the agricultural age. Thinking humankind requires a logic that inhabits the excluded middle zone, without relying on the logistics that resulted in neoliberal capitalism. A more ambiguous and less rigid form that doesn't fall on some kind of idealized living substance.
Humankind implies differences between humans. It implies other life forms that aren't strictly human, which means that we can't point to it in a non-tick spacetime.
There's a difference between how a thing appears and what it is, but whatever a thing is, it is not just how it appears for another entity. Its being is not fully graspable. For Timothy Morton, pointing in an ontic fashion, which basically means what is there in a physical sense, is exactly what leads to racism, which is exactly what leads to speciesism as well. Racism affirms that we can point to some kind of human essence in a physical way, where whiteness becomes one of the default superior qualities of the human substance.
And yet this whole called humankind exists even if we can measure it, even if we can count all its entities, even if we can point to it directly. We can identify materials in Earth's crust that weren't put there by frogs or squirrels. So there must be a way to talk about this entity without compromising our politics, without replacing humankind with mankind as the white Western face of it, without saying that we're equally responsible or that we're all in this together.
Saying that one by one we make a whole that is automatically greater, saying that we are always present with all that we are, like we are some very well defined pieces in a construction, is a bit violent and a bit alienating, so perhaps we should aim for something a little bit weirder. Like saying that humankind is bigger on the inside, because we are much more than the blended economic transactions, patterns and consumption habits that are shaping things on a geological scale. We are much more than what we can point to in a physical sense, and yet we are still humankind, not frogkind.
But this whole includes differences. It includes other beings in the symbiotic kind of network, and it includes other things that aren't always present.
I like that we can have this chameleon ability to be in different ways, as Timothy Morton says.
Figuring out what the human thing is the human thing.
I like that, and I like even more that it can be the frogs thing too. Humans aren't on one side and animals on the other. We aren't radically different in the sense that ontologically we are 5 stairs above everything else. Attuning to who we are includes other life forms and other beings, which says something about who we are in return. Humankind is solidarity with non-human people for Timothy Morton, because solidarity just is the noise made by discrete beings when they rely on one another. Thanks for watching this video. Perhaps this video as well is less than the sum of its parts.
But it's part of a bigger series on thinkers and concepts. We will be making more for a little while. While we last. So if you find this series interesting, consider supporting us on Patreon or Ko-fi. It would really help us keep it going. And whatever you think about it, leave a comment so we can talk more.